The message arrived in the middle of the night. Captain Elias Carter was half asleep when the communicator on his desk started blinking. He groaned, rubbing his eyes as he reached for the device. The United Galactic Council rarely contacted humans directly, and when they did, it was never good news. He tapped the screen, and a holographic image appeared. An official from the Galactic Council, a gray-skinned Selvian with sharp, glowing eyes. His voice was calm but urgent. "Captain Carter, you have been summoned by Queen Salari of the Salari Empire. She requests a human for a task no one else can do. You have been chosen." Elias blinked. "A human? For what?" The official's expression remained neutral. "The details are classified. You must leave immediately." Elias sighed. He had seen a lot in his years as an engineer and problem solver, but this was something new. The Salari were one of the most powerful and mysterious species in the galaxy. They rarely spoke to humans, let alone requested their help. Whatever this was, it had to be serious. With no time to waste, Elias packed his gear, boarded the nearest transport ship, and set course for the Salari homeworld, Zithra. The journey to Zithra. The journey took 3 days through hyperspace. As Elias sat in his small cabin, he read everything he could find about the Salari. They were an ancient race, known for their beauty and intelligence. Their bodies shimmered with bioluminescent patterns, and their wings allowed them to glide effortlessly through their sky cities. Their technology was thousands of years ahead of humanity's, yet they were secretive and rarely shared knowledge. So why did they need him? Elias had fixed starship engines, reprogrammed malfunctioning AI, and even helped terraform small planets. But this was something else. As the ship approached Zithra, Elias finally got a look at the planet. It was breathtaking. A world covered in glowing jungles, massive crystal formations, and floating islands suspended in the air. The entire atmosphere seemed to pulse with energy, as if the planet itself was alive. The moment the ship landed, a group of Salari guards approached. Their tall, slender forms moved with an unnatural grace, their glowing wings shimmering in the twilight. One of them, wearing an ornate silver robe, stepped forward. "Captain Carter," she said in a melodic voice, "Queen Salari is waiting." Meeting the Queen. The Salari Palace was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Towers of crystal spiraled into the sky, and waterfalls of liquid light flowed through the grand hallways. Strange, floating creatures drifted through the air, casting soft, colorful glows. Elias was led into a massive chamber where Queen Salari sat on an elegant throne made of silver and glowing gemstones. She was even more stunning than he imagined, tall and regal, with translucent wings that sparkled like the night sky. Her violet eyes studied him carefully. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, in a voice smooth as flowing water, she said, "You are the human." Elias cleared his throat. "Captain Elias Carter, at your service, Your Majesty." Salari nodded. "Do you know why you are here?" "Not really. Your people just said you needed a human for something no one else could do." A flicker of something. Was it frustration? Crossed her face. "My people do not like asking for help. We are a proud race. But now, we have no choice." She stood and walked toward a large floating sphere in the center of the room. With a wave of her hand, the sphere glowed, projecting a holographic image of Zithra's core. Elias leaned in, trying to understand what he was seeing. "Our planet is dying," Salari said. "The core stabilization system, built by our ancestors, is failing. If it collapses, Zithra will be destroyed." Elias frowned. "I'm sorry, but your people are some of the smartest in the galaxy. You've built technology that humans can't even dream of. So why call me?" Salari's glowing eyes locked onto his. Because Salari think in patterns, in logic, in perfection. This machine is beyond logic. It is unpredictable. We have tried everything, and we have failed. She stepped closer. "We have studied humans. You are chaotic. You do not follow patterns. You think differently. You are willing to take risks, to break rules, to try the impossible. And that is what we need. Elias let out a slow breath. The Salari needed a problem solver, someone who didn't rely on cold calculations, but on instinct, creativity, and gut feelings. That was why they had chosen a human. He scratched his chin, looking at the projection of the planet's core. "All right," he said finally. "Show me the problem. Let's see if a little human chaos can save your world." Salari smiled, a small, rare smile that no Salari had likely given to a human before. "Then we begin." Elias followed Queen Salari through the grand palace corridors. The walls shimmered like liquid glass, shifting colors as they walked. The soft hum of energy pulsed beneath their feet, as if the entire building was alive. Salari walked with grace, but Elias could see the tension in her movements. The queen of the mighty Salari Empire, one of the most advanced species in the galaxy, was desperate. And now, somehow, everything depended on him. They entered a large chamber, where a group of Salari scientists stood around a floating hologram of Zithra's core. The hologram displayed strange, glowing rings, slowly spinning around a bright sphere of energy. But something was wrong. The rings flickered, and cracks of unstable energy sparked across the projection. One of the Salari, a tall male with silver markings on his arms, turned toward the queen and bowed. "Your Majesty, we have analyzed the latest readings. The core is destabilizing faster than expected. We may have only days left." Elias crossed his arms. "All right, someone explain this to me in simple words. What exactly is happening?" The scientist glanced at Salari, then back at Elias. He hesitated, as if unsure whether to explain such an important matter to a human. But Salari gave him a nod. The scientist sighed. "Our ancestors built the core stabilization system thousands of years ago. It controls the energy balance deep within the planet. Without it, Zithra's core will become unstable, and the planet will collapse." Elias frowned. "So, fix the system. Repair whatever is broken." The scientist shook his head. "We have tried. The system does not respond to our calculations. It does not follow logic. We do not understand why it is failing." Salari stepped forward. "This is why we need you, Captain Carter. Humans do not always follow logic. You see things differently. You find solutions where others see failure." Elias exhaled. "No pressure, right? Just save an entire planet full of billions of lives." He stepped closer to the hologram, studying the flickering rings. The unstable energy reminded him of something, like a spinning machine running out of balance. If the rings were meant to control the core's energy, then maybe something was interfering with their movement. He turned to Salari. "Take me to the real system. I need to see it myself." Salari exchanged glances with her scientists before nodding. "Very well. But be warned, human. No one has stepped inside the core chamber for centuries. Into the depths of Zithra." A transport pod carried Elias and Salari deep underground. The further they descended, the more the walls changed, from smooth palace metal to ancient stone covered in glowing symbols. The air grew warmer, filled with a strange electric tension. The pod finally stopped in front of a massive door, carved with Salari markings. It was easily 5 stories tall, pulsing with an eerie blue light. Salari raised her hand, and the door slowly opened with a deep rumbling sound. Inside was a massive cavern filled with swirling energy. At the center, a huge machine hovered above a glowing pit of molten energy, the core stabilization system. Elias whistled. "Well, that's something." The machine was unlike anything he had ever seen. Gigantic metallic rings, each covered in intricate Salari symbols, rotated in midair around the core. But they weren't moving smoothly. Some rings flickered, some trembled, and some looked completely dead. Salari pointed. "There. The rings must be in perfect motion to stabilize the core." but they are failing. Elias walked forward, pulling out his scanner. He frowned as the data came in. That's weird. The energy levels keep shifting. It's like... He paused. Then his eyes widened. Wait a second. This system isn't just a machine. It's alive. Salari's wings twitched. Alive. Elias nodded. Not in the way you think. This system isn't just reacting to commands. It's responding like an organism. It's adapting, trying to fix itself, but it doesn't know how. It's confused. Salari studied him for a moment, then turned to her scientists. Have we considered this possibility before? The lead scientist shook his head. Impossible. Our ancestors designed this system with precise calculations. A machine does not think for itself. Elias smirked. Yeah. Well, neither do humans. And yet here we are. Salari tilted her head. Then how do we fix it? Elias sighed. We stop treating it like a machine. We figure out what it's trying to do and help it instead of forcing it. He stepped closer to the core, watching the flickering rings. His mind raced. If the system was acting like a living thing, then maybe it needed more than just technical repairs. Maybe it needed something only humans were good at, improvisation. He turned back to Salari. I have an idea, but I'm going to need full access to this system. No restrictions, no rules. The Salari scientists gasped. That is forbidden. This technology is sacred. Salari stared at Elias for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, she nodded. Do what you must, Captain Carter. Save my world. Elias grinned. Now we're talking. As he cracked his knuckles and prepared to dive into the most advanced system he had ever seen, one thought ran through his mind. Time to show the galaxy what humans can do. Elias stood in front of the massive core stabilization system, his eyes scanning the rotating rings and the unstable energy that surrounded them. The machine was old, ancient even, and it was struggling to do its job. Sparks of energy flickered in random patterns, making it clear that something was wrong. Salari and her scientists watched him closely. They had tried everything, calculations, advanced repairs, even using their most powerful energy sources, but nothing had worked. Now, their last hope was a single human. Elias cracked his knuckles. All right, let's see what we're dealing with. He pulled out his small multi-tool, a human invention that combined scanning, hacking, and manual control into one device. The Salari scientists looked at it with doubt. Their technology was far more advanced, but Elias didn't care. Sometimes, simpler tools got the job done better. As he activated the scanner, streams of data appeared on his visor. He frowned. This system isn't broken in the way you think. It's not just failing, it's confused. One of the Salari scientists scoffed. A machine does not get confused. It follows programmed commands. Elias smirked. Not this one. Your ancestors built something more than a machine. They built an artificial intelligence, and it's been running for so long that it doesn't understand what's happening anymore. Salari stepped closer. Are you saying it is alive? Elias nodded. Not in the way we think of life, but yes, it reacts, adapts, and tries to fix itself. But right now, it's failing because it doesn't know what the right solution is. He tapped his chin. It's like an old spaceship autopilot that's lost its way. It keeps adjusting, keeps trying, but it doesn't know what the original path was anymore. The Salari exchanged uneasy glances. No one had ever thought of their sacred technology as something that needed to be guided rather than repaired. Salari's wings twitched slightly. Then what do we do? Elias exhaled. We talk to it. Speaking to the machine. Salari led Elias to a control station, an elegant platform made of glowing material. Floating above the molten core, she pressed her hand against a shimmering panel, and the console came to life. Streams of ancient symbols and energy pulses appeared before them. Elias placed his multi-tool on the control panel and linked it to the system. The moment he did, A strange hum filled the air. The energy rings around the core flickered, as if reacting to his presence. "Well, hello there," Elias muttered, watching as the reading shifted. "Let's see if we can understand each other." The Salari scientists watched in silence. No one had ever tried to communicate with the core stabilization system before. Elias typed in simple commands. "What is your status?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, symbols on the console changed. A response appeared, written in a mix of Salari and strange, distorted characters. ERRR. Core stability. Compromised. Seeking coercition. No solution found. Elias nodded. "Okay, so you know something is wrong, but you don't know how to fix it." He thought for a moment, then typed again. "What was the original stabilization pattern?" The system hesitated. Then a new display appeared, one showing how the rings had moved centuries ago. They had once spun in a perfect harmony, balancing the core's energy. But over time, small changes had thrown everything out of sync. Now the rings were struggling to find that original balance. Elias grinned. "There it is. We don't need to repair the system. We need to remind it what it was supposed to do." Silara's eyes widened slightly. "How do we do that?" Elias tapped his visor. "We reset it. Not by shutting it down, but by giving it the original rhythm again." He stepped back and looked at the energy rings, watching how they wobbled and flickered. Then, without thinking, he began tapping his fingers against the control panel, creating a steady, repeating rhythm. The Salari scientists exchanged confused looks. What is he doing?" one of them whispered. But Salara watched closely, fascinated. The machine responded. Slowly, almost uncertainly, one of the rings adjusted, sensing slightly to Elias's rhythm. He grinned. "That's it. You're starting to remember." He continued tapping, adjusting as he went, until more rings began to follow. The machine wasn't just a collection of mechanical parts. It was something that needed guidance, something that responded to patterns. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was finding patterns where no one else could. But just as progress was being made, something went wrong. A sudden malfunction. Without warning, a loud alarm blared through the chamber. The console flashed red, and the core shook violently. The energy rings flickered in and out of existence, and the floor beneath them trembled. Silara's wings flared. "What is happening?" Elias's scanner beeped wildly. He read the data and cursed under his breath. "The system's memory is corrupted. It's trying to restore the old pattern, but parts of it are missing." The scientists panicked, stepping back. The energy waves were growing unstable. If they didn't act fast, the system could collapse completely. Elias grabbed Silara's arm. "I need full manual control. Now." She hesitated for only a moment before pressing a command on the console. The interface shifted, unlocking deeper controls that no one had used in centuries. Elias's fingers flew across the panel. He wasn't just fixing a machine. He was teaching it to trust him, to follow his lead. The core pulsed wildly, but he didn't stop. He set a new rhythm, using his instincts, his human ability to adapt. And then, with a final input, the energy rings locked into place. The core pulsed one last time, then stabilized. Silence filled the chamber. The trembling stopped. The warning lights faded. Elias let out a deep breath, wiping sweat from his forehead. That was close. Salara stepped forward, her glowing eyes filled with something new. Respect. "You did it." Elias smirked. "Not yet. We've calmed it down, but we still need to fully restore it. And for that, we need to go even deeper." Salara nodded. "Then we proceed." As the machine hummed softly behind them, Elias couldn't help but grin. This is where the real challenge begins. The core stabilization system had stopped shaking, and the energy rings were slowly stabilizing. But Elias knew this was only a temporary fix. If they didn't fully restore the system, it would fail again. And this time, there might not be a second chance. Salari watched as Elias studied the controls. The Salari queen had always believed in logic, in precise calculations. Yet this human had done something no Salari scientist could. He had connected with the machine in a way beyond numbers. "You said we need to go deeper," Salari said. "What do you mean?" Elias tapped the console, bringing up more data. "The core's memory is corrupted. The system wants to restore the original balance, but it's missing key parts of its programming." One of the Salari scientists frowned. "But this machine is thousands of years old. We do not have the original data anymore." Elias smirked. "Then we find it the old-fashioned way. We go inside." The room fell silent. Even Salari looked surprised. "Inside?" Elias nodded. "If the data is lost, it might still exist within the system itself, deep in its ancient structures. We need to enter the core chamber and manually restore whatever is missing." The lead scientist's wings twitched nervously. "That is impossible. No one has entered the core chamber in centuries. The energy inside would vaporize any living being." Elias crossed his arms. "Then we find a way to survive it." Preparing for the descent. Minutes later, Elias stood inside a preparation chamber, suiting up in advanced protective gear. The Salari had developed powerful shielding suits, but none of them had ever been tested inside the core chamber itself. Salari entered the chamber, her expression unreadable. "You are willing to risk your life for this?" Elias chuckled. "I didn't come all this way to quit now." Salari studied him for a moment. Then, to his surprise, she picked up a second suit. Elias raised an eyebrow. "You're coming too." The Salari queen nodded. "This is my world, my people. I will not stand back while a human does what we should have done long ago." Elias grinned. "I like your style, Your Majesty." Into the core. The entrance to the core chamber was a massive circular door glowing with ancient symbols. As Salari activated the controls, the door split open, revealing a long, narrow bridge leading into a swirling vortex of energy. The moment they stepped inside, Elias felt the heat. Even through his suit's protection, the raw power of the core pressed against him like a heavy weight. Sparks of golden energy swirled around them, illuminating the vast chamber. At the center of the room stood a massive crystalline structure, the true heart of the core stabilization system. But something was wrong. Deep cracks ran through the crystal, and inside, flickering lights pulsed in chaotic patterns. Salari pointed. "That is the memory core. If the missing data still exists, it will be there." Elias nodded. "Then let's fix it." They stepped forward, carefully navigating the unstable bridge. The closer they got to the memory core, the more intense the energy waves became. Elias reached the control panel beside the crystal and linked his multi-tool to the ancient system. A rush of corrupted data flooded his screen. "There it is," he muttered. "The missing pieces are still here, but they're locked behind errors." Salari watched as Elias worked. "Can you restore them?" Elias exhaled. "I can try, but I need to do it fast. This whole place is unstable." Restoring the past. Elias's fingers moved quickly over the controls. He bypassed corrupted files, reconnected old data paths, and slowly rebuilt the missing pieces of the system's original programming. Lines of ancient Salari code appeared on the screen, shifting and reforming as he worked. It was like piecing together a shattered puzzle, one fragment at a time. Suddenly, a warning flashed on his visor. "Critical error, data integrity failing." Elias's heart pounded. The system was rejecting the restoration. If it fully collapsed now, there would be no saving it. Salari stepped forward. "Let me try." Elias hesitated. "This system is breaking apart. If we push too hard, it might shut down completely." Salari placed her hand on the console. "My ancestors built this. If there is even a small chance that I can reach it, I must try." She closed her eyes and pressed her palm against the crystal surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the glowing cracks in the memory core began to pulse in a steady rhythm. Ancient Salari symbols floated in the air, reforming into their original patterns. Elias watched in awe. "You're guiding it, just like I did before." Salari opened her eyes. "No, I am reminding it of what it was always meant to be." The memory core flashed brightly. The final pieces of lost data locked into place. A deep hum filled the chamber, and the energy rings outside suddenly stabilized. Elias checked his scanner. It worked. The system is fully restoring itself. But before he could celebrate, a deep tremor shook the entire chamber. Salari looked around. What now? Elias checked his readings again. His eyes widened. Oh no, the overload is reversing. The core is about to restart. Right now. The protective barriers inside the chamber flickered. The swirling energy around them grew more violent. The entire room trembled as the memory core pulsed with raw power. Elias grabbed Salari's arm. Time to go. They sprinted toward the exit, dodging bursts of unstable energy. The bridge beneath them cracked, but they pushed forward. The massive entrance door was already closing. With one final leap, they dived through just as the doors slammed shut behind them. A moment later, a deep pulse echoed through the underground complex. The energy rings of the core stabilization system flared to life, shining in perfect harmony. Silence followed. Then, a steady hum filled the air, the sound of a system that had finally remembered its purpose. Elias lay on the ground, breathing hard. He looked up at Salari and grinned. Well, that was fun. Salari exhaled, a rare smile touching her lips. You are an unusual being, Captain Carter, but today you have saved my world. Elias sat up, stretching his arms. Yeah, well, that's just what humans do. Elias lay on the cool metal floor, catching his breath. The hum of the core stabilization system filled the air, steady and strong. It was a beautiful sound, the sound of success. Salari stood beside him, gazing at the massive energy rings that now spun in perfect harmony. For centuries, her people had tried to fix this system. And yet, in just a short time, a human had done what no Salari could. She turned to Elias. You have done something incredible today. Elias smirked. Yeah. Well, I'm getting used to it. He sat up, rubbing his sore shoulders. But we're not done yet. We need to make sure the system is stable for the long term. Salari nodded. Agreed. We must analyze the full restoration. The Salari scientists rushed into the chamber, their glowing eyes wide with amazement. One of them checked the readings on his console and gasped. The energy levels have fully stabilized. The system is performing at peak efficiency. Another scientist whispered in disbelief. We thought this was impossible. Elias grinned. Well, humans like to do the impossible. Salari looked at the scientists. Begin a full diagnostic. I want to confirm every detail. The scientists quickly got to work. Elias dusted himself off and leaned against a railing. So, Queen Salari, what's next? She hesitated for a moment before answering. Now, we prepare for what comes after. Elias raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Salari's expression was unreadable. You have done more than restore a machine, Elias. You have changed the future of my people. A new future begins. Hours passed as the scientists checked the system. The results were undeniable. The core stabilization system was operating better than it had in centuries. The Salari homeworld was safe. Elias stood with Salari in a grand observation hall, watching as Salari ships flew through the sky, their glowing trails leaving patterns in the dark clouds. The city below was filled with lights, brighter than before. It was as if hope itself had returned. Elias took a deep breath. It feels good, doesn't it? Saving a world. Salari glanced at him. It is more than I expected. She looked thoughtful. The Salari have always believed in order and logic. We do not take risks. That is why we could never fix the core. Elias smirked. And humans, we take risks all the time. Salari nodded. Yes, and sometimes, risks bring the greatest rewards. She turned to face him fully. I wish to learn more about your kind, Elias Carter. I believe the future of the Salari and humans is tied together. Elias crossed his arms. So, what are you saying? You want an alliance? Salari was silent for a moment. Then she spoke with a determined voice. Yes, I do. Elias whistled. Well, that's big news. Humanity's never had an official alliance with the Salari before. Salari stepped closer. And yet, here we are, standing together after accomplishing the impossible. Elias chuckled. You know, Salari, I think I'm starting to like you. She tilted her head. That is a good thing, I assume. Elias laughed. Yeah, it is. But before they could continue, a sudden alert rang through the hall. The Salari scientists appeared, looking uneasy. Salari turned sharply. What is it? One of the scientists hesitated before speaking. We found something else in the system, Your Majesty. A hidden message. Elias frowned. A message? The scientist nodded. It was buried deep within the memory core. It only appeared after the full restoration. Salari's wings twitched slightly. Show us. The scientist led them to a central console. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing a series of glowing symbols. Salari's eyes widened as she read them. Elias glanced at her. What does it say? Her voice was quiet, almost in shock. It is a warning from our ancestors. The forgotten warning. Salari's hands hovered over the console as she translated the message aloud. To those who awaken the core, beware. The energy that sustains our world is not endless. It is linked to something far greater, something beyond our understanding. If it is disturbed, it may awaken forces long forgotten. Elias narrowed his eyes. That doesn't sound good. Salari exhaled slowly. I do not understand. The core is meant to protect our world, not endanger it. What could our ancestors have feared? The scientist hesitated. There is more. The symbols on the screen shifted. A final message appeared, glowing brightly. The key has been turned. The Watchers will come. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The Watchers? Who are they? Salari shook her head. I do not know. They are not mentioned in any of our records. Elias crossed his arms. Well, that's not good. The Watchers will come sounds a lot like trouble is on the way. The room fell silent. The realization sank in. They had saved the core, but in doing so, they had triggered something unknown. Salari straightened. We must prepare. Whatever is coming, we will face it together. Elias nodded. Agreed. But first, we need to figure out exactly what we're dealing with. Salari looked at him with determination. Then we begin immediately. Elias smirked. Well, I was hoping to take a nap after saving the world, but I guess that'll have to wait. Salari gave him a rare smile. Welcome to the future, Captain Carter. As they stood before the glowing message, one thing was certain. Their adventure was far from over. Elias stared at the glowing message on the screen. The words, "The Watchers will come," echoed in his mind. The Salari had no record of them, but their ancestors had left this warning hidden deep in the core's memory. Salari stood beside him, her expression unreadable. We must understand this message before it is too late. Elias crossed his arms. Agreed. But first, let's answer the big question. Who or what are the Watchers? The lead Salari scientist, Talaris, adjusted his scanning device. We found another section of the message, but it is incomplete. It seems to reference an ancient location, a place called the Vault of Echoes. Elias raised an eyebrow. That sounds dramatic. Salari turned to her scientist. Where is this vault? Talaris hesitated. It is an ancient site, lost for thousands of years. Its last known coordinates are deep within the shadow sector. Elias frowned. Let me guess. Nobody goes there. Salari nodded. The shadow sector is a dangerous region, filled with gravitational anomalies and unstable energy fields. Many who enter do not return. Elias smirked. Sounds like my kind of place. Salari sighed. Of course it does. She turned to her people. Prepare a ship. We leave immediately. Into the shadow sector. A sleek Salari vessel soared through space, heading toward the shadow sector. The crew was small. Elias, Salari, Talaris, and a few Salari navigators. The ship's energy shields glowed as they entered the strange, dark region of space. The moment they crossed into the shadow sector, the ship's systems flickered. Energy interference detected. Talaris reported. This entire sector is unstable. Elias watched through the window. The stars here were dim, and strange distortions twisted space itself. Creepy, he muttered. Salari checked the navigation. We are close. The Vault of Echoes should be ahead. Suddenly, an alert flashed on the screen. Unidentified object detected. Elias leaned forward. What kind of object? Talaris zoomed in on the display. A massive structure appeared, floating in the darkness. It was ancient, built from black stone, with glowing symbols carved into its surface. It looked like a temple, standing alone in the void of space. Salari's eyes widened. The vault. Elias grinned. Well, that was easy. Then, the ship shook violently. Something's pulling us in. Talaris shouted. Elias grabbed the control panel. Brace yourselves. The ship was caught in a powerful force, dragging it toward the vault. The engines roared as Salari tried to fight against it, but it was useless. A few moments later, the ship was gently placed on a landing platform inside the ancient structure. The force holding them disappeared. Silence followed. Elias exhaled. Okay, that was weird. Salari stood. We have no choice now. We must go inside. The vault awakens. The air inside the vault was thick with an eerie energy. The walls glowed faintly, and ancient Salari symbols lined the massive corridors. Talaris scanned the surroundings. The architecture is Salari, but different. It is far older than anything we have ever seen. Elias ran his hand along the wall. Feels like it's been waiting for something, or someone. They walked deeper into the vault. At the center, they found a massive circular chamber. In the middle stood a strange device, an enormous sphere floating above the ground. Salari stepped closer. This must be where the message came from. Talaris activated his scanner. There is something inside the sphere, a stored message. Elias looked at Salari. Should we activate it? She hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Yes, we must know the truth. Talaris pressed a control panel, and the sphere began to glow. A deep hum filled the chamber. Then, a holographic figure appeared. An ancient Salari elder. The figure's voice echoed through the chamber. To those who find this place, you have restored the core. You have set things in motion. But be warned, the Watchers have seen your actions. Elias narrowed his eyes. Okay, that's not comforting. The hologram continued. The Watchers are not enemies, nor are they allies. They are beyond our understanding. They observe, they wait, and when the balance is changed, they act. Salari frowned. Act how? The hologram's expression turned grim. They will come to see if your species is worthy, or if the balance must be restored by force. A heavy silence filled the room. Elias crossed his arms. Great, so we just rang the doorbell of some ancient cosmic judges. Talaris swallowed nervously. It appears so. The hologram continued. If you wish to prove yourselves, you must seek the trial of the Watchers. But be warned, failure has consequences. The message ended, and the sphere powered down. Elias let out a slow breath. Well, that's a lot to take in. Salari turned to him. We have no choice. We must face the Watchers. Elias smirked. I was afraid you'd say that. Salari glanced at the sphere. The only question now is, are we ready? Elias looked at her and grinned. We're about to find out. As they stood in the ancient vault, the weight of their mission became clear. The Watchers were coming, and the fate of both Salari and humans would be decided by what happened next. Elias stood in the ancient vault, his mind racing. The hologram's message was clear. The Watchers had seen them, and now they had to prove themselves. Salari's glowing eyes were filled with determination. We must find the trial. If we fail, the Watchers may see us as a threat. Elias smirked. No pressure, right? Talaris studied the floating sphere. The vault contains a gateway, a portal to the place where the trial will happen. But I do not know what awaits us on the other side. Elias cracked his knuckles. Only one way to find out. Salari nodded. Activate the portal. Talaris pressed a sequence of buttons on his scanner. The sphere glowed brightly, and a circular doorway appeared in the air, swirling with golden energy. Elias took a deep breath. Here we go. Together, he and Salari stepped through. The Watchers arrive. They emerged into a vast, endless space filled with stars. Floating platforms stretched in all directions, forming a massive structure that seemed both ancient and alive. Elias looked around. This place is unreal. Suddenly, a deep voice echoed from all sides. You have come. Shapes appeared before them, tall, glowing beings with no solid form. Their bodies shifted like liquid light, and their eyes burned like tiny stars. We are the Watchers. Salari stepped forward. We seek the trial. We seek understanding. The tallest of the Watchers tilted its head. You have restored the core. You have changed the balance. Now we must decide if your kind is worthy of what comes next. Elias crossed his arms. And if we're not? The Watcher's eyes glowed brighter. Then we restore the balance by removing the disturbance. Elias exhaled. Figures. Salari remained calm. What is the trial? The Watchers extended their hands. A new platform appeared before them, rising from the void. It held 3 glowing orbs, each pulsing with energy. Choose one, the Watcher said. Your choice will decide the nature of your trial. Elias stepped closer. Each orb was different. One burned like a star, one shimmered like water, and the last crackled with lightning. He looked at Salari. Any guesses? She studied the orbs. We must choose carefully. This is not just a test of strength. It is a test of wisdom. Elias thought for a moment, then pointed to the shimmering orb. Water. It adapts, it finds a way, just like humans, and Salari working together. Salari nodded. Agreed. They reached out and touched the orb. The trial of unity. The moment their fingers touched the orb, everything changed. They were no longer on the platform. Instead, they stood on a vast ocean, the water stretching endlessly in all directions. Salari gasped. Where are we? Elias tapped his foot. Standing on water. That's new. A deep voice echoed. This is the trial of unity. To pass, you must reach the other side together. But beware, only those who trust each other will succeed. Before they could react, the water beneath them shifted. Suddenly, they were separated by rising walls of liquid. The path ahead twisted and changed like a living maze. Elias shouted, Salari, can you hear me? Her voice echoed. Yes, but I cannot see you. Elias looked around. There was no clear path, no instructions. The water changed shape constantly. A test of trust, he muttered. All right, let's do this. He closed his eyes and focused. Salari, we need to move together. Follow my voice. He took a step forward, and to his surprise, the path beneath him held firm. Salari's voice was steady. I trust you. Keep going. Step by step, they moved in sync. The maze twisted, but they adapted. They didn't force their way through. They let the water guide them. Finally, the barriers vanished, and they stood together once more. The ocean faded, and they were back before the watchers. The tallest watcher nodded. You have passed. You have shown trust, adaptation, and unity. Elias grinned. So, does that mean we win? The watcher's eyes glowed. It means your people are ready for what comes next. A new beginning. The trial was over. The vault's gateway brought them back to their ship. The moment they returned, the core on Salari's homeworld sent out a new signal, one that spread far beyond their galaxy. Elias turned to Salara. What do you think happens now? She looked at the stars. The watchers will observe, but they will not interfere. We have proven ourselves. And now, we build our future together. Elias smirked. Well, if this is just the beginning, I think I'm gonna need some more coffee. Salari gave him a rare smile. Then I shall make sure we have plenty of it. As their ship soared back towards Salari space, one thing was certain. This was not the end. It was the beginning of something far greater. The end.